There's some guy out here.
Some guy? Wait, he's looking at you? Is he doing anything else?
Welcome to Green Mushrooms, the channel where we explore how video games can have a positive effect on our lives. Firewatch was one of those games for me. Why? Let's get straight into it. Firewatch is a story-driven adventure game from Campo Santo where you play as a fire lookout called Henry who spends the summer of 1989 in an American national park. Some would call it a walking simulator, but I think that term has negative connotations. After all, not all games need to have combat. Firewatch is all about the story, and it's an excellent example of the unique ways in which video games can deliver a powerful, thought-provoking narrative through interactivity. The game's prologue jumps between text and brief sections of gameplay where you make your way to the national park. The text tells you about how Henry met his wife. It goes into the ups and downs of their relationship, highlighting certain significant moments. The player gets to make some small decisions about the story that helps make it feel a little bit more personal to them. As Henry walks deeper and deeper into the forest, the player learns of the tragedy that befell the couple and caused the protagonist to essentially run away to this remote region. I think the simplicity of the text, mixed with the somber music and ambient sound design, is genius. There's something very intimate about reading. The player must use their imagination to create these characters and the handful of scenes mentioned. One could argue this was done because the developer didn't have a huge budget to animate a bunch of cutscenes, but I believe doing it this way enhances the experience. You rarely see any faces throughout the game, and when you get a brief glimpse, the art style is cartoony. But there's nothing cartoony about the story. These characters feel like real people, and this story feels like real life. The player imagines what these people might look like in the same way a reader conjures up the appearance of characters in a book. Giving the player the power to do this, to have part of the game take place in their head, adds to the intimacy and helps make you feel part of this world. With the power of modern day computers, AAA game companies have the ability to create almost realistic looking humans, which is great, but there's still power in allowing the player to use their imagination. Think about one of the most successful tabletop games of all time, Dungeons and Dragons. Part of the reason people love this game so much is because they get to create an epic fantasy world inside their head. And video games have had this same relationship with the player since the very beginning. Think about the first Legend of Zelda. Kids who played that didn't just see pixels on a screen, they took those graphics and translated them through their brain to create the magical world of Hyrule. It would have looked slightly different to each player, but that's what's so fantastic about it. It's what makes video games so personal to us, and it's part of the reason why we love them so much. But let's get back to Firewatch. Henry makes his way through the forest and eventually reaches the Two Forks Lookout Tower, your home for the rest of the game. It's here that you're introduced to the other main character, a woman called Delilah, who speaks to you through a walkie-talkie.
Two Forks Tower, this is Thoroughfare Tower. Come in.
Hello? Whoever this is?
It's Henry, right?
Yeah.
I'm Delilah.
Yeah, that's what the guy said on the phone.
So, what's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
People take this job to get away from something. So what's wrong?
What's wrong with you?
Delilah is your boss, and most of the game revolves around her giving you tasks and sending you to various parts of the forest. As mentioned before, this game lacks combat and it only features a small amount of environmental puzzle solving. Your biggest challenge is navigating the forest using the map and compass. This means the conversations between the two main characters have to be good in order to keep the game interesting. And luckily, the writing and voice acting are where Firewatch shines the most.
There's some guy out here.
Some guy? Wait, he's looking at you? Is he doing anything else?
I don't think so.
Henry, there's something someone should have told you about this area.
What is it?
It's outside.
Come on.
The whole thing. And people come and go as they please. It's madness.
This game is essentially an interactive audio drama. Henry and Delilah are deep, three-dimensional characters who feel real. While Henry is arguably slightly more sincere than Delilah, both characters are the type of people who mask their insecurities through humour, something I find easy to understand. Their chemistry is electric, and I found myself calling Delilah over every little rock and tree just to hear more conversations between these two protagonists.
It's a really nice waterfall down here.
I want to avoid giving away spoilers because the story is the main focus of the game, but what I will say is that it gets more and more interesting the further you get into it. Henry and Delilah's bond increases, and this makes sense, because in this isolated wilderness, she is the only person you have to talk to. This is probably part of the reason why the game is set in the past, before everyone had the internet in the palm of their hands. Isolation is a huge theme in this game, and one that seemed very relevant to me playing it again in 2020. The isolation boosts your relationship with Delilah at the beginning, but later on, as the game's mysteries begin to unfold, it has the opposite effect. Henry begins to become paranoid, and he questions whether he can even trust Delilah, this woman who he has never seen, and who seems to avoid answering difficult questions, often deflecting them with humour or sarcasm. Another very realistic human trait. I've heard some people describe the ending as odd or anticlimactic. I won't go into what happens, but I will say I disagree. I think the ending is perfectly fitting for the story. The moral of the game seems to be that you can't hide from your problems forever. As much as you may want to engage the fantasies in your head, reality is never very far away. There's a couple of other things I like to mention. The visuals are simple but beautiful. The colours all around you are constantly changing, and I often find myself staring at the scenery like I would a picture in an art gallery. Despite being less complicated than some AAA games, the environments in Firewatch are still able to convey the power and vastness of nature. There aren't many animals in the forest except birds, a deer you see at the beginning, and one turtle. But this lack of wildlife adds to the feeling of isolation, which, as mentioned before, is a big part of the game. The sound design is also excellent. It brings the forest to life and helps immerse you in this colourful world. And finally, the writing and voice acting, arguably the most important parts of this game, are fantastic.
It is a hell of a nice camping spot down here by the lake.
I haven't been down there in years, but yeah, Jonesy Lake area is perfect.
Henry and Delilah are charismatic, endearingly flawed, and I could listen to them chat all day long. Firewatch is a deep, intelligent, thought-provoking and emotional game that explores the complexity of the human condition. It demonstrates the unique ways in which video games can tell complicated stories, and it does so in a way that is entertaining. If you haven't played it already, I would highly recommend it. Thank you for listening. Look after yourselves out there, and until next time, goodbye.